My name is Anna Campion, and welcome to the first video on my YouTube channel, which I'm starting to talk about women's soccer, specifically the women's national team and the NWSL, but really, kind of everything. Those are just the two things I happen to know a lot about. In today's video, I wanted to talk about why I believe that the U.S. women's national team was always going to win gold at the Olympics this past summer. For those of you who missed it, they defeated Brazil in the final match of the Olympic soccer schedule to take home the gold, and people did not really think they were going to do it. So I'm going to talk about why I think they won. The higher you climb, the harder you fall, and few people, teams, groups know about this as well as the U.S. women's national team. The U.S.'s 2023 Women's World Cup campaign was their worst ever. They exited in the round of 16 after a penalty kick shootout with Sweden and with a goal that Alyssa Nair, to this day, swears she saved. And I'm inclined to agree with her. But regardless, huge fall from grace. Right after that World Cup, Megan Rapinoe retired and Vlatko Andonovski was fired, which fans loved and maybe the players did too. I don't know. Players have always really liked him. But regardless, there was a huge change in identity, right? Nobody really knew what the future was. Everyone kind of thought like, oh, maybe the women's national team isn't really hot anymore. How is a team who had won 4 World Cups and 5 Olympic medals going to bounce back after such a disastrous showing and without a head coach, for the record, in time for the 2024 Olympics? The argument for a lot of people was that they would not. Spain ended up winning the 2023 World Cup, which, while was a first for the nation, it wasn't exactly an underdog story. Spain has some of the best players in the world on their team, including Jenny Hermoso, Alexia Putellas, Onya Batil? I'll put a correct pronunciation here.
Spanish footballer Ona Badie
And Aitana Bonmati are only a few of their world-class players. It's no secret that in the years since the U.S. women's national team's first win in 1991, women's soccer worldwide has garnered massive amounts of investment and attention, improving the quality of the game across the board. This worldwide investment is in no small part due to the U.S. women's national team's very public and supported fight for pay equity with the U.S. Soccer Federation and their subsequent win. So you have stars like Megan Rapinoe, Alex Morgan, Carly Lloyd, and countless others really spearheading this campaign, and they won. They did it. And because of this increase in worldwide quality, naysayers of the U.S. women's national team often commented on how the world has, quote, caught up, and how because of this, the U.S. women's national team just really wasn't as good as they used to be, or even if they are as good as they used to be, everyone else is good too. U.S. Soccer announced the hiring of Emma Hayes as head coach for the women's national team in November 2023, with Twyla Kilgore serving as the interim head coach. Kilgore was the interim head coach until Emma Hayes actually joined in May 2024 due to Emma Hayes' continued contract with the Chelsea women's football team over in England, in London town. Anyway, sorry. This hire was expected, and it was really brilliant. It was a really great move on U.S. Soccer's part. Emma Hayes is one of the most winning coaches in history. She's taken Chelsea to 16 trophies, multiple of which are Champions League Cups. So obviously, she is coaching the best of the best to beat the best of the best. We're talking she's beating teams like Barcelona, Lyon, Arsenal, all these incredible teams. So even though this was a very brilliant coaching move, it put the women's national team in a really tricky situation, which was even confirmed by young players like Trinity Rodman in the months leading up to the Olympics.
What is it like during this interim period? Like, how does it feel knowing that Twyla's with you in camp, but Emma is watching from somewhere, but it's not like you can just go up to Emma and clarify anything? Like, how does that feel as a player?
It's just, I don't want to say uncomfortable, but it is just like weird. Because there is very, very limited communication, and it's the communication from Twyla to us. So it's like you're being scouted all the time almost. Like, it's almost like a scout at this point in time. So, yeah, it is. It's like Twyla obviously is her own coach, and she's been brought in to be the interim, and she has her own points being the actual coach in the camp. But at the end of the day, it's like, does Emma want all the same things that Twyla's wanting in this moment in time, or are things going to change as soon as she comes in and she's going to want a completely different thing, which I doubt it's going to be like that. But at the same time, that is in the back of my head of like, you never know if there is a disconnect of like, there's one specific thing that she might tweak, or like one specific formation that she might want based off personnel. So I think that's also a very interesting thing.
So what Rodman's saying here is a completely fair question, particularly for Rodman, because as a forward, she was at the time competing for a spot on a very tiny Olympic team. We'll get to that later, with some of the best forwards in the world looking at the same position. So we're talking Sophia Smith, Mallory Swanson, Alex Morgan, Midge Purce, Jaden Shaw, Kat Macario, and Lynn Williams. Not to mention all the other amazing forwards who did not get called into camp. Hayes had a big decision to make in a short period for the Olympics, ultimately picking Smith, Swanson, Shaw, Rodman, and Macario for the Olympic squad. However, Lynn Williams ended up coming in to replace Kat Macario when Kat Macario had to pull out due to injury, which, you know, it happens. And I am a huge Lynn Williams fan because I am a huge Gotham fan. So sue me if I was a little bit excited about that, but obviously hope Kat Macario is doing okay, et cetera, et cetera. I root for all these women, you know. But anyway, Hayes' communication through Kilgore and Kilgore's own coaching prowess ended up winning the women's national team the CONCACAF W Gold Cup in March 2024, which was a huge confidence boost for Kilgore, right? So this tournament, so the CONCACAF W Gold Cup was the inaugural of its kind, basically women's national teams from the CONCACAF conference. So Canada, Mexico, who else did we play?
We played these teams.
But playing a lot of really good teams. Canada in particular, who won the gold medal at the Olympics in 2020. So once we ended up winning that tournament, it was huge. It was really big because there were a ton of young players on the squad. Alex Morgan ended up having to come in for an injured Mia Fischel. She tore her ACL, which is a huge bummer. And yeah, I mean, it was a really good momentum to have going into the Olympics. When the Olympics ended up actually coming around, the U.S. was projected to maybe win bronze or silver. Every pundit, every reporter that I saw was predicting that Spain would medal, that Canada would medal, and that maybe a wild card like Brazil or something would medal. And maybe a couple of them had the U.S. winning bronze, which nothing wrong with bronze, right? I mean, winning third place at the Olympics is a huge deal. The U.S. won bronze at the 2020 Olympics, and they did not necessarily want to do that again. They wanted to win gold. Fair enough. So in preparation for the Olympics, Emma Hayes announces the roster, which did not include Alex Morgan. And everyone was kind of like, what? It ends up kind of making more sense now at time of recording, October 22nd, because Alex Morgan probably at the time was in the very early stages of her pregnancy. And it probably ended up being a blessing in disguise because she has since retired from professional football as a whole, not just international, the NWSL as well, in preparation for the birth of her second child. So all the best to her, but everyone was really shocked because this is the first time that Alex Morgan wasn't included on a roster for her professional career. So, and she's obviously one of the best in the world. She's one of the best to ever do it. So this got some blowback. This got some real heavy blowback, including from me. I'm going to be honest with you. I love Alex Morgan, so I was pretty upset to not see her on this roster. But again, in hindsight, I think I was proven wrong. Emma Hayes favored really, and still favors, as we see in the October camp rosters, really young talent. For some reason, Emma Hayes is really into midfielder Corbin Albert, who, while not a bad soccer player by any means, I don't really think has the talent to be on this team. I find that she has kind of sticky feet. She has poor passing skills, and she also happens to alienate a huge part of the women's national team fan base, queer women, because she's homophobic and transphobic, and as a homo, I don't like that. And as a person, I don't like that. Again, very young roster, but very talented roster. So, you end up having, like I said earlier, all those forwards, midfielder Sam Coffey, who's absolutely wonderful, Naomi Girma at center back, Emily Sonnet, Rose Lavelle, And also some really solid alternates, rookies Hal Hirschfeld and Croy Bethune, both out of Washington Spirit. Jane Campbell as an alternate for goalkeeper. So like I said, the roster was anchored by veterans like Lindsay Horan, Rose Lavelle, Emily Sonnet, and Alyssa Nair. You know, the squad's youth made people a little jumpy. None of these players had international experience on the level of the Olympics. Very few of them had been in the World Cup last year, and people were nervous. People were really nervous because this is a huge tournament, and I'm going to go more into that. However, as the group stage started, a lot of the critics, myself included, were proven wrong with the choosing of the squad. We had 2 definitive wins in a row against Zambia and Germany. Neither easy opponents. Zambia having some of the best forwards in the world, and Germany having who I think is the best goalkeeper playing soccer right now, and Katrine Berger. And I'm not just saying that because she's for Gotham. I'm saying that because she's good, okay? And yes, Anna Morehouse is technically, statistically better, but I think Katrine Berger is better. And I'm allowed to think that, and you're allowed to disagree with me, ultimately. Anyhow, those are 2 difficult teams to beat, and we beat them both handily. With the group stage structure, where both points and goal differentials are counted, the women's national team quickly flew through to the quarterfinals with a hard-fought win against Japan. So before we go, super deep into the semifinals and the final, I want to talk about why I believe the women's national team was uniquely equipped to deal with the intense schedule of the Olympics. So the Olympic Games schedule is over 16 days, with 6 games played throughout that period if a team makes it to either the bronze medal or gold medal match, right? So those are the 2 finals, basically. If we do the basic math on that, okay, so that's about 1 game every 2.5 days, okay? So keep that in mind. 1 game every 2.5 days. I'll put it right here. We compare that to the World Cup. I'll put World Cup stuff over here, maybe. The World Cup takes place over 1 month. So in 2023, it took place from July 20th to August 20th, which made it 31 days. So Spain, the eventual winners of the 2023 World Cup, they played a total of 7 games. And in doing that math, that's approximately 1 match every 4.5 days, right? World Cup, biggest tournament in the world. You play 1 game every 4.5 days. Olympics, you play 1 every 2.5 days. That's a huge difference in terms of just the time crunch and the fatigue that happens, right? The women's national team, they basically had 2.5 days between every match, and at least one of those days was taken up by traveling from city to city in France. Except for 1 week where 2 games were played in Marseille, the U.S. women's national team traveled from Nice to Marseille to Paris to Lyon back to Paris, right? Between Nice and Marseille, they had 3 days between games with a 2 to 2.5 hour journey, depending on if they took a train, if they took a bus, traffic, etc. Between Marseille and Paris, they had 2 days between matches and a 3-hour, 20-minute journey. Between Paris and Lyon, they had 3 days between games and a 2-hour journey. And back to Paris from Lyon, they had 4 days and another 2-hour journey. In all of these calculations, I'm basically giving everyone the benefit of the doubt here and taking the shortest possible times I can find based on, it's way quicker to take a train, it's way quicker to drive a car, here's ideal traffic conditions, etc. Right? But I feel like anyone who's even had one of these 2-hour travel days, whether it's on a train or a car or stuff, the rest of the day is shot, dude. I can't do anything when I travel for 2 hours. All that to say, travel days are exhausting, right? And they were doing 1 every time that they were playing a game, again, with the exception of that 1 week. So if you factor in that these athletes were either training then transporting or transporting then training, it's just an absolutely exhausting schedule. Furthermore, the Olympic roster only allows for 18 players with 4 alternates. Now, what does that mean? For comparison, the World Cup requires a 23-player roster, and most club teams have somewhere between 20 to 28 players on their roster, depending on just the league they're in, the specific club, etc. So the Olympics has an 18-player roster, which means that you have 11 players on the field and 7 players available on your bench. Those 4 alternates, they can come in and out per game day. So for example, Tierna Davidson was out for a couple of games with a leg injury. So I believe they put Emily Sams on the roster just to have someone to substitute for her. But Tierna Davidson wasn't on the roster when she was injured, right? So you're still capped at 18 players per game, which is a low amount of players. It is an extremely low amount of players compared to, again, the World Cup and most of these people's club teams, right? So let's just take all of this in together, right? A lot of games in a short period of time create intense fatigue for players, especially with a couple of these games going into overtime, marking 120 minutes of play versus regulation 90. The International Olympic Committee, the IOC, also makes the teams travel, like I mentioned, adding in another layer of exhaustion. And then finally, with 5 fewer players than are allowed in the World Cup, coaches are required to make difficult cuts, factor in fewer substitutions, and have their players play longer minutes than normal, particularly in these overtime games. The women's national team went into overtime twice during the quarterfinal match against Japan and the semifinal match against Germany. And when you're faced with these situations and you just don't have the personnel to be able to switch up your roster even from game to game with the same way, which for the record, Emma Hayes made very few switches to her roster, which I tend to disagree with, but also she has limited options, right? You normally are able to have what is functionally an entire second team with, 9 to 12 extra players on your bench to having, half of what you need in 7 players on the bench. So it's a really difficult position for players and coaches alike. And, the women's the U.S. team isn't the only one who was affected by this. You saw it if you watch the games. There were a ton of injuries. There are a ton of, just things that, if either there were more players allowed or if the schedule was a little bit longer, you wouldn't see the same amount of players, going down and getting cramps and muscle issues and having tension issues. Like it just doesn't happen if you give them the amount of time that they need to rest and recuperate. So, with all of that said, why do I think the women's national team was uniquely qualified to do better in this tournament style than the other teams? It's because of the NWSL. Of the 22 players in the Olympics, including the 4 alternates on the U.S. national team, 19 players came from the NWSL, right? So why does that matter? The U.S. is huge. It's so big, guys. It's massive. So let's look at an average month of play for Gotham FC, my favorite team, and FC Barcelona Femení. So both of these teams were really heavily represented in the Olympics, right? They both had a ton of players going to different teams internationally, and a lot of their players played in the Olympics, right? A lot of their starting really good players. In September 2024, FC Barcelona Femení played 4 games. On the 8th, the 13th, the 22nd, and the 29th. Of those 4, 2 were at home for Barcelona, and 2 were away. Both were roughly a 2-hour flight away from Barcelona proper. In the same month, Gotham FC played 7 games, okay? And 2 of those were for the CONCACAF W Champions Cup, different from the CONCACAF W Gold Cup, for the record. The Champions Cup is a club tournament, and the Gold Cup is an international team tournament, just for the record. But because 2 of those games were played for this kind of unrelated league tournament, I'm just not even going to count those for the sake of fairness. So they still played 5 games, the 1st, the 8th, the 16th, the 22nd, and the 28th. And of those 5 games, 2 were at home for Gotham and 3 were away. The flight times for those away games were 2 hours, 45 minutes, 6 hours, and 3 hours, respectively. The flights I have cited are just kind of like the shortest commercial flights that I could find, and it is reasonable to expect that some of these teams, maybe they've chartered jets or have private jets or whatever, but that still doesn't take, like even having a private jet, it doesn't take that much time off of a flight from New York to Seattle, right? It's just an insane amount of distance to cover. In the postmortem of the Olympics, Rose Lavelle even credited the NWSL for preparing these U.S. players for the rigorous travel schedule and the rigorous, schedule of play.
Like, kind of about being able to push your body beyond what you maybe thought was possible for yourself. And I think especially in the Olympics with the short turnarounds and like so many games in a small period, towards the end, like, it definitely is like a mental battle. And I will say, I think like, shout out NWSL, I feel like we have to play like hard games a lot, literally the whole season. So like sometimes I'm like, this is just a 3-game week in the NWSL. Yeah.
I've thrown a lot of numbers at you and a lot of stats at you, and I understand that can be intimidating. So let me wrap it up in a nice little conclusion for you. Most players on the U.S. women's national team, they have to travel distances that European players simply don't because of the vastness of the United States. Within 1 week, Gotham FC had to take 2 6-hour flights to Seattle and back for a game. That is simply not the reality for a lot of players who play primarily in European leagues, whether that be Liga F, Bundesliga, the WSL, whatever it may be. And it is a constant reality for players like Lynn Williams, Rose Lavelle, Jenna Neiswanger, Tierna Davidson, Crystal Dunn, and Emily Sonnet, right? They are used to traveling and they are used to quick turnarounds, and these European players just are not. They are not. So I think the NWSL schedule and level of competition are undoubtedly the main factor in this team's success. Of course, the women's national team has phenomenal talent and has for years, but we are in an era, a lot of that established talent retiring, right? A new era of young, relatively green players came in and won a gold medal because their bodies were used to the demands being put on them. Of course, I don't want to take away any credit that Emma Hayes and the U.S. coaching staff deserve, really. Emma Hayes coming in her first month and a half with the team and winning a gold medal is phenomenal and just goes to show what type of coach she is. I'm saying I don't think all the credit can be given to her. That's all I'm saying. The NWSL is constantly being put to the side in favor of European counterparts, such as the ones that I just mentioned. We can see this in recent Ballon d'Or nominations with Naoma Girma, women's national team, and San Diego Wave defender being snubbed despite playing every minute of the Olympic campaign and playing well. She is without question the best center back in the world right now. There is no question. The women's national team in the Olympics would have been screwed without her, in my opinion. Players often leave the NWSL to play in Europe in an attempt to be noticed by national team coaches because the assumption is that European leagues are better and more competitive due to the level of talent, the constant threat of relegation, and the constant chase for promotion. We can see that with Sofia Huerta. She just went over to Olympique Lyon and in an attempt to, get some national team time. All I'm asking for is us to kind of challenge that notion. We're already seeing it. Emma Hayes was recently on a tour of all the NWSL clubs. She was at a ton of games over the past couple of weeks. And for too long, soccer, football, whatever you want to call it, has been dominated by Eurocentric standards of excellence. And we are seeing that being disproved in real time, those standards of excellence. I love watching the WSL. I'm a Man U fan, and it is a competitive league. The fact that the WSL clubs are in England with established male team counterparts does not make them automatically better than NWSL teams, right? Some might wish to question me on this, since Arsenal and Chelsea both had friendlies against Gotham FC and the Washington Spirit where the English teams won. And yeah, that happened, okay? But I invite you to look at it a different way. Mainly that those friendlies took place right after the Olympic break, where both the Washington Spirit and Gotham FC were bringing their multiple Olympic players back to regular season minutes, including for the Spirit, Trinity Rodman and Casey Kruger, and for Gotham, all the names that I've listed a million times, but Rose Lavelle, Emily Sonnet, Lynn Williams, etc. Okay, Arsenal and Chelsea did not have nearly the same ratio of players in the Olympics, since England was not in the Olympics. My point is, how can anyone argue the WSL is a superior league to the NWSL when the country where most of their players hail from, England, did not qualify for the Olympics? Oop, she said it. Oop. There is a nuance there, right? There is nuance there. It's difficult to get to the Olympics from Europe. Everybody knows that. And I understand. But I think the NWSL has more than proven its ability to be a breeding ground for competitive players, superstar teams, and just fun soccer to watch, right? It's not all about Europe, baby, okay? So I think the U.S., it was always going to win the gold medal. The vast majority of the 22-player squad plays in a league where every single game matters, every opponent is worthy, and the drive to win is insatiable. Of course they were going to play to win. Every game these players engage in needs to be a win for playoffs, for pride. I'm not saying other countries were not competitive, because they were. We fought hard against Japan. We fought hard against our semifinal against Germany, right? We fought hard in our final against Brazil. Okay, these are not easy teams. I'm just saying the American soccer mentality is a cut above the rest, if you ask me. And then maybe I'm biased. You can let me know in the comments down below, because I have a YouTube channel now. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed the video. I enjoyed making it. And yeah, if you want to like and subscribe, that's cool. If you want to comment, let me know where I'm wrong, please do. And yeah, I'll be back at some point with another soccer video, probably about the October friendlies, if I'm being honest. But anyway, peace and blessings.